Imagine a disaster hitting a major city. Not an earthquake, not a fire, but a 25-foot-tall wave of molasses. Sounds like a joke, right? But on January 15, 1919, this bizarre, sticky tsunami tore through Boston, becoming one of the strangest and most tragic disasters in American history. What turned a simple sweetener into a deadly weapon? And how did this sticky situation change America forever? Let's dive into the bizarre story of the Great Molasses Flood. Our story begins in Boston's North End, a bustling neighborhood packed with homes, businesses, and a massive 5-story tall steel tank. This wasn't just any tank. It held over 2 million gallons of crude molasses for the Purity Distilling Company. Molasses was big business back then, a key ingredient for making industrial alcohol used in munitions for World War I. This tank was the company's golden goose. But from the day it was built, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Locals called it the Moan. For years, the tank groaned and creaked under the immense pressure of the millions of gallons of thick liquid inside. Dark, sticky streaks of molasses constantly leaked from its seams, so much so that neighborhood kids would bring cups to collect the sweet goo that dripped down its sides. Purity Distilling was aware of the problems. Instead of fixing the structural flaws, they just painted the tank brown to hide the leaks. It was a classic case of profits over people, a decision that would have catastrophic consequences. The day before the disaster, a fresh, warm shipment of molasses was pumped into the already near-full tank. This warmer molasses sat on top of the colder, denser molasses at the bottom, creating unstable layers and increasing the internal pressure. Then, on January 15th, an unseasonably warm day, the temperature shot up from near freezing to over 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The metal of the tank expanded, the molasses inside fermented, releasing carbon dioxide gas, and the pressure became unbearable. Just after noon, witnesses reported hearing a deep, rumbling sound, followed by what sounded like machine gun fire, as the steel rivets shot out from the tank's sides. Then, with a deafening roar, the tank completely failed. A colossal, 25-foot-high wave of molasses, weighing an incredible 12,000 tons, exploded outwards. It moved at an estimated 35 miles per hour, an unstoppable brown tide of destruction. This wasn't a slow, oozing spill. It was a violent, powerful wave that hit with the force of a locomotive. It smashed into buildings, ripping them from their foundations. The elevated railway track nearby was buckled and torn apart. Wagons were crushed, and horses, trapped in the thick, suffocating syrup, were unable to escape. The wave was so powerful it picked up a freight car and tossed it into the harbor. People in its path were swept up, either crushed by the force of the wave or drowned in the thick, sticky substance that filled their lungs and airways. The scene was pure chaos. The air, thick with the sickeningly sweet smell of molasses, was filled with the screams of the injured and the dying. First responders, police, firefighters, and sailors from a nearby naval ship rushed to the scene. But the rescue effort was a nightmare. The molasses was waist-deep in some areas, a sticky quicksand that trapped both victims and rescuers. The cold January air quickly turned the molasses into a thick, glue-like trap, making every step a struggle. They worked for days, wading through the brown sludge, pulling out survivors and recovering the bodies of the less fortunate. In the end, 21 people lost their lives, and another 150 were injured. The cleanup was almost as monumental as the disaster itself. It took over 80,000 manos to chip, scrape, and wash the molasses away. Firefighters used salt water pumped from the harbor to dissolve the sticky coating from the cobblestone streets, which then ran brown into the water, staining it for months. For decades after, on hot summer days, residents swore they could still smell the faint, sweet scent of molasses in the North End. It became a ghostly reminder of the tragedy. In the aftermath, the finger-pointing began. Purity Distilling, the tank's owner, initially tried to blame the disaster on anarchists, claiming the tank had been bombed. It was a convenient excuse in the post-war era of the Red Scare. But the victims and their families weren't buying it. They banded together and filed one of the first class action lawsuits in American history against the company. The trial was a landmark case. It lasted for years and involved an incredible amount of expert testimony. The company's lawyers argued it was an unforeseeable act of God. But the plaintiffs' legal team brought in scientists and engineers who meticulously dismantled that argument. They proved the tank's walls were too thin, the steel was too brittle, and it hadn't been properly tested or inspected. They showed that the company knew the tank was leaking and had simply chosen to ignore the danger. In the end, the court found Purity Distilling entirely responsible. They were ordered to pay out what would be equivalent to millions of dollars today to the victims and their families. But the impact of the Great Molasses Flood went far beyond financial compensation. The disaster and the subsequent court case became a wake-up call for the entire country. It exposed the horrifying consequences of unchecked corporate negligence and led to a revolution in safety standards. From that point on, new laws were passed across the United States. Engineers, architects, and public officials were now required to sign off on their plans. stamping them with their approval and taking personal responsibility for their safety. Building codes were strengthened, and the process of construction became far more regulated. Today, when you see a professional engineer's stamp on a blueprint, you're seeing the direct legacy of the Boston molasses flood. That simple seal is a promise that a structure has been properly designed and is safe for the public. A promise born from a 25-foot wave of molasses. So, the next time you pour syrup on your pancakes, remember this bizarre and tragic story. The Great Molasses Flood is more than just a weird historical footnote. It's a powerful lesson about corporate responsibility, the fight for justice, and how even the strangest of disasters can lead to changes that keep us all safer today. It reminds us that cutting corners can have devastating human costs and that holding powerful entities accountable is essential for a just and safe society. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into forgotten history. Let me know in the comments what other strange historical events you'd like me to cover. Until next time, stay curious.